So today we're going to talk about the 5 Ps. This is something that I've been doing software for now 27 years, and I've just been amazed at, first of all, how time flies and how things change. And it's really, I'm growing rather nostalgic. I'm sitting here in a house where my family owns, and here in Dominica, just how much things have changed over the last few decades, both in this house and in our field. But I think right now we're starting to see a very interesting shift in technology and technology platforms. I should say in the thinking that we need to adopt to be ready for the change that's afoot in digital today. When I started out, it was very much about, I wouldn't even say applications. I would say that when I started out, it was just about, yes, the web and getting stuff out there and some forms and whatnot, but these weren't really applications. You had a form, you could submit some data to somebody and there you create an email, maybe a CGI gateway, but I would barely call those things applications, though you might want to argue that the servers that they ran on were application servers. Later on, we had a shift towards more application thinking and some of these automation frameworks that allowed us to build more robust applications. That was the application thinking phase. We need an app to do X. That was the way you thought. I have this problem. I need an app to do this thing. It's a hammer. It's a hammer, and I need a tool. I have a nail. I need a hammer. Hammer's the application. The nail is my problem. But today, I think we are starting to see that we need to shift. I believe we need to shift to different sort of a thinking, not application level thinking, but platform thinking. And rather, what we think when we're thinking about platforms now is not simply, I have a nail, I need a hammer, but we need a system, a platform that enables us to achieve a set of outcomes in an integrated and sustainable way. And that's the difference between the one and the other. And I think if you remain stuck in application thinking, you'll soon go the way of the dinosaur, because that is shifting rapidly, in large part thanks to generative AI, but also to traditional things like that we've been coming, I should say traditional, nothing's traditional over the last 20 years, but certainly SaaS and SaaS platforms are making applications more of a commodity. And so if you're investing in applications as your strategy as a developer, digital professional, that's not really the great way to be thinking, but rather thinking about the enterprise as a whole, not just as a collection of tools, not just a toolbox of hammers and saws and wrenches, but as a living system, as a network consisting of people and policies and processes that are all supported by technology. Now, that's a different mindset altogether. And every app, every dashboard, every automation is just one piece of a larger puzzle. It's one piece of a larger puzzle that is not just technical, but also very human. And that's why we have the DX Alliance. And what I've been adopting over the last 15 or so years of my career is really the shift towards more of this 5P way of thinking. It's a framework. The 5Ps, first of all, the people involved in any kind of an application or system framework, and an organization, in an interaction, the people involved there, the purpose that those people want to achieve, or rather the purposes that those people want to achieve, the problems that are standing in between those people and them achieving those purposes, the processes today that they follow, and the processes that they should follow in order to achieve the purpose that they have in mind. And then finally, after we've taken a look at the people, their purpose, the problems that stand in their way, the processes that they take, then we look at platform. And platform is the last of the P's, not the second. What we typically do, and I've seen this over and over again, and it's not just here in the region in the Caribbean, it's all over the world. We've jumped straight from, I have a problem, I have a nail, I need a solution, platform, and hammer. That's right from one to the other, and skip a bunch of steps along the way. And that typically leads to all kinds of disconnects between the solution and the purposes that you want to achieve. Let's take you through that and just try to get a little bit practical about that. When we talk about people, so who are we designing for? Who are the people involved? They're both the internal people and the external people. Okay, both from an aspect of what your customers or your people you serve want to achieve, what the organizations typically serve somebody outside of the organization. Okay, it's not just an internal facing thing. So what are those people? What do they want to achieve? And internally, who are the people in our own organizations? What does that look like practically speaking? It is things like stakeholder maps. So having a map of, you can literally, we spent some time creating a map of stakeholders. You get a listing of the stakeholders. You can create a physical artifact that shows, even in form of things like org charts or relationship maps, mapping out those things. And I love having visual maps rather than documents, because you deliver a document to a client, and I can tell you most of the time they barely read it. Almost nobody reads your document. You can spend a lot of time on it. But if you have a picture, it's worth 1,000 words, literally worth 1,000 words. I know we use it as a big figure of speech, but I can give you 1,000 words, or I can give you one picture that gets the point across. And I can guarantee you'll pay more attention to, and you'll get the better idea with the picture than you will with the document. So creating a visual stakeholder map, a visual organizational chart, is a great way of doing that. You can annotate that with perhaps some numbers, and you have stakeholder, Mary, and maybe a number or a reference that can point to a persona or a profile, and that's where you use your words. What does Mary like to do? What does she do in her job internally in the organization? What does Jack, as a customer, do? Jelani, I should use. I want to use more West Indian names now. What does Jelani, as a customer, want to do, and what's his persona like? What are their roles with relation to the system? And when I say the system, again, not the technical system, but the organization as a system and as a platform. What is their relationship to that? Another artifact that you can work on, a RACI chart. So RACI charts, that refers to, who knows what RACI means? I'm doing a little interactive test. What's a RACI? Going once. RACI chart. Going twice. Who's the keeners? Or quick at Googling. Going 3 times. I'll take a Google at this point. Don't disappoint me. I see you smiling, Stuart. Come on.
I know it's risk. We have that risk analysis. I don't remember what the CNIR.
No.
Oh no.
Responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed.
Ha! Ding, ding. There you go, Rohan.
At the end of the day, it's just a project management tool, isn't it?
Fast Googling right there.
Just a project management tool. David Matherin, bite your tongue. Bite your tongue. No, it's not a project management tool. It's a tool to prevent people from passing the buck, and to know also, if you are given, for example, the responsibility for a task. If you're giving the responsibility of a task, you don't know which other members of your team are accountable to helping you deliver that. You have no authority. You don't know who should be consulted or informed. You're doing it in a silo. And I can tell you, your task is especially if it's part of a complex system, is probably going to be a hot mess. And so RACI is about the response, is about setting out, when you're doing these people analyses, you want to find out in your system, what is my team member responsible for, accountable for, consulted about, and informed about? What should the customer be informed about? What are they accountable for? Things like paying, for example, on time. These things have to be mapped out. And when you map them out, and by the way, I think that sometimes in organizations, and we need to go through this exercise at the DX Alliance a little bit more fully. In organizations, until you actually spell all of these things out, it's all in people's heads, and it's so easy for the ball to get dropped. And the RACI chart is, yes, it is a project management, is used in project management quite a lot, but being explicit about who is responsible, accountable, should be consulted and informed about things is something that yields. I wish in government, especially here in the region, that we had RACI charts for public service. I wish that we knew who is accountable to the public, who should be consulted, who should be informed about certain things before they're done. and ultimately who's responsible for delivering them. And these are tools for good governance, and that's going to work in any system. And I think that's also necessary in your software digital systems as part of the larger platform ecosystem in which it finds itself. Of course, when you're dealing with people, you want to as well interview them, talk to them. That's one of the things that I have found, and I know this is recorded, and we'll make sure we put a clip out there so I can actually say, when I'm a resident of Barbados, even though I find myself in Dominica today, and some time back I heard about the not the digital IDs, which I have a wonderful Barbados national ID card, which is digital. And I heard that finally we'll be doing the APIs and everything else like that. But interestingly enough, when I reached out to the Barcode members, and Barcode stands for Barbados Coders, I guess, something like that, of that nature. They're technologists in Barbados. And I asked who knew about these things coming, well, ahead of time. Has anybody even been involved or consulted? So few of us in the public in Barbados, even in the technical public, had been informed or consulted around the digital IDs before it was put out. And there was a great deal of mistrust with regards to digital IDs because of that. So if you inform and consult your customers or your constituents and make it clear who is responsible and accountable with regards to the things, then you can certainly engender much more trust. And that's why stakeholder interviews and summaries are such an important part of that process when it comes to the people part. So designing solutions, it's not just about putting together bricks and pipes. It's about having a conversation with people about how they want to live and what they're trying to achieve. That leads to the second P, which is their purpose. And that can take the form of a purpose statement. It's simply a one-pager for the project or for the platform that you're designing. A map of objectives can go very well with the stakeholder map, with the stakeholder map that I mentioned earlier. And purpose as well comes down to something else a little bit more concrete: criteria and KPIs. So if you have a purpose you want to achieve, these purposes should be attached to something measurable so that we know when we have achieved them. I want to sell more by having an e-commerce platform. How much more? In what period of time? It should be a SMART goal. I'm going to do my test again with another acronym. Come on. It's going to tell me what a SMART goal is. Going once. Twice.
I only
There's no
remember
prizes here. Yes, go ahead.
letters, I think. I can't remember what S is. I know M is measurable.
Yes.
I think T is time block.
The S is specific.
Yes. Achievable and time bound. Yes. They're very good. Everybody gets partial points. So yeah, you want to have those things locked down in your KPIs. So what are your KPIs? What are your metrics? You want to get those down in a concrete format before you start building a darn thing. Not a thing. Don't build anything until in a concrete, measurable way what success looks like. Okay. So that's the purpose. So now, what is standing in the way? What are the problems? That's the third P. That is standing in the way of us achieving those KPIs, achieving that purpose statement, of achieving the objectives in that map. So that can take the form of problem statements. It can take the form of root cause analyses, where you ask, okay, why did this problem happen? Then why does that happen? And why did that thing happen? So if you ask enough whys, sometimes they say about 5 whys, you're going to get down to the root cause of an issue. So you want to do some root cause analyses, write those things down, again, before you start designing solutions, before you start creating them. And it does not, by the way, take forever to do that. You can do all of these things I'm talking about in a week in some engagements, if you can get a hold of the customers to have interviews. This doesn't take a lot of time, but you should do them. And then an impact analysis is perhaps something else that's optional that you could have as well. So what are the impacts of the problems? Because not all problems are created the same. Some are more impactful and some are worth more spending time on than others. And so you do all of those things out, those 4 Ps. So the people, the purpose that they're trying to achieve, the problems that they have. And then you get down to something very practical, the processes involved in there. So that involves having a very simple, in many cases, current state process flow. And now we're getting more into things that we can start to develop digital solutions around, by the way, because when you have that process map, you're also talking about not just the digital processes, but the other processes, the offline. Call center receives call from customer, then has to look up this record, determines whether there is an issue, then addresses it in this way. So you start to build out that process map to flesh out what's happening. That's the current state process map. And then you want to design something in the blueprint for a future state process map. And that is where you start to get into the solutioning, really, of the ultimate platform. And when we compare this current state process to the future state process, and by the way, that process includes everything. It includes the actors who are participating in it. In between your little boxes on your flowchart, you might have references to data or information that flows between one person or one system and the other. You map those out in the current state and you map it out in the future state. And that data and process analyses visually, again, I'll say in this case, especially at the process step, you cannot skip a diagram. I have read enough documents that describe processes, and it's impossible to keep them straight in your head, especially if they're complex enough to warrant hiring a developer of an enterprise caliber to work on it. There's got to be a diagram. Otherwise, there's no place for you to hang it in your head mentally, at least not for me. For those of you who can do it in your heads, I envy you, but I can't. So you create a diagram around that current and future state. And this is where we do our gap analysis. And this gap analysis is some of the things, you map up that gap analysis with some of the highest impact problems. And those things you put on the top of your backlog for the final P, the platform that you're going to start building. And I'll say that in our idea that we've shifted from application thinking to platform thinking, and that the platform or the system is not just the code that I'm writing, but how it interacts with the human beings and the system as a whole. That is not something that I believe in a modern digital organization can be a set it and just let it be situation, set it and leave it thing. It's an evolutionary part of the thing. So we start to go through the evolution of building out the platform, seeing how what we do interacts with our customers and in the real world as we build out the platforms. What are the deliverables for a platform? Going to be tangible. You've done the design, you've done the gap analysis. Now you need to do some requirements. So you do your requirements, your features, your epics, your user stories. You create a prioritization of those items on your backlog, because like I said, not everything is worth spending time and money on. So you prioritize the things that have the highest impact on the problems that you're trying to address to achieve those purposes. You want to go through sometimes a platform selection process, but now you have very strong things to use in order to evaluate your platforms. And we're doing that right now with a couple of customers, helping them pick pieces of their digital platform. And you want to build out a roadmap for that prioritized backlog. What do we do first? How do we get to the final state that we envision? And I will say, because we're talking about an integrated system that deals with people over time, that perhaps what you design on day one, you should get, I like to say this often, you should really fall in love with your visions, but not your individual plans, right? The goals that you want to achieve, the purpose that you want to achieve, but not necessarily this piece of code or this particular plan as you go through the evolution of a platform. So you want to iterate on that and develop your ecosystem, the platform for the customer over time. I believe that's how we're going to distinguish ourselves in this new age. Now, I want to say, just as a final talking point, maybe before we just open up to more general discussion, that generative AI is changing the game. It's getting better and better at doing code. Now, it's overhyped, I got to tell you, a little bit still. especially from an architecture perspective, you really still need human beings in the game because the complexities there are, I think we underestimate. We're talking right now models that can handle hundreds of thousands or even sometimes millions of tokens in any one request. If you had to think about the number of tokens that you take into account when you are doing a piece of work, it is not just what was on the user story. It was you understanding that what was on the user story was not everything, that it was part of a larger system, that you had to interact with other people on your team, that they were working on other things, that this piece is more important than that piece to the customer, that this piece will cost more. There are so many things that you process as a human being that you cannot put into a prompt. And I want to say that again. You can't put that into a prompt and then spit out an architecture that will work in a complex people plus digital ecosystem, right? So AI is not going to get there anytime soon, but it'll start getting better and better at applications. So we need to start shifting our mindset if we want to survive into this next age from that application thinking and get better. AI is going to be better soon at writing code than you or me. But creating a solution is a different thing. I remember as a young person, and I'm now 56. I was born in 1969. Oh my God. But I remember in physics class when there was a big debate as to whether or not to outlaw these new Texas Instruments scientific graphing computers that you could buy for, I don't know, $150, $200, $300. And they wanted to outlaw that from my math and physics class because it used to be able to draw the graphs for you. Okay. Suffice it to say that you are allowed to have your devices and your scientific calculator in schools today. But why? Because people are not doing square roots in their heads anymore. They're not doing the complex graphs. But what are they doing? Hopefully, they're spending some more of that time doing even more complex things, solving problems that are different. And I think it's going to see the same thing, that it's not about code anymore. It's not going to be about coding. I've been doing it for 27 years. Mika, who's a recent grad, who's getting ready to graduate from UE, Rowan, you're in 27 years, it's not going to be, it's going to be like writing the code is going to be like doing the square root manually. When I was in high school, they taught us how to do manual square roots, and I'm sure they probably taught that to you guys too. But we don't do that day to day. We use our calculators for that. But there still are people who make a living in mathematics and science. And as a matter of fact, they're pursuing more complex and interesting things than they ever did before because they don't have to do those calculations in their heads anymore. What do I want to say then is let's focus on what we are better at. Technical ability alone will not be the edge of the future. What are human beings good at? And there's a wonderful book that was recommended to me. I'm actually just getting through it. It's called Humans Are Underrated. And it is something that I think we need to start leaning into. All of those P's that I mentioned, they are necessary to have a great digital platform, being part of a human digital ecosystem in which we find ourselves. That is the modern organization. But it is far too complex for any system of comprising of only a few million tokens to understand or to parse. That is what we are good at. We are good at the emotional context of things. We are better at things like empathy. We are better at understanding each other. So in a world where AI can do the heavy lifting, we need our value to, as digital professionals, to be around how well we understand and connect with other people. We need it to be around understanding the very complex interplay of people's own personal interests. You can put a wonderful CRM into place into a sales organization. Unless you can make your salespeople care about using it, it won't mean a darn thing. And making people care is something that only human beings are really good at. If your AI counselor says, I care about you, Brittany, and it's an AI counselor, versus a human being saying, Brittany, I care about you. So don't do that, Brittany, because it's bad for you. your AI says to you, and I don't want bad things to happen to you because I care about you. First of all, you say bullshit because I'm sorry for the recording, but you say BS because you know the AI doesn't care about you. But if your counselor or your friend says, don't do that, Brittany, because it's bad for you and I care about you, you might not do it because you don't want to disappoint the person who cares about you. And so I say that even as digital professionals, I know that we can tend to be analytical and people might look at us like robots, but the skill for digital professionals in the future is understanding the first 4 Ps in particular: the people, the purposes, the processes, the problems that they wanted that are standing between the ways before we get to platforms. And that is something that's going to be very hard for AI to reproduce. And it's also, quite frankly, the reason why so many digital platforms fail, or so many initiatives that people put out there fail. Just in closing my monologue, if you want to future-proof your role, don't just level up your coding or design skills, level up your ability to listen, to synthesize, to understand, to connect with people, because that's where the real magic happens. All right. Okay, so I'm going to get off my pulpit right now. And comments, questions?
If I could just add to what you would have said, Dennis, this is going from my actual recent experience. Just to give very quick context, I'm not sure how many people in this call are aware that I would have launched a startup of my own a couple months back. Now, a lot of what Dennis says is so relevant to my journey in launching because, quite simply and quite bluntly put, my entire direction with the startup from the start was just completely wrong. Yeah. There was too much focus on the tech and the tech that I was building and the energy that went into the tech rather than first understanding really what the problem was that I was trying to solve, who my audience was, and as Dennis says, the 5 Ps, yeah? Saying that then now to say this, I've actually pivoted with the startup, and it's now a completely different mission, a completely different direction, which more aligns with really understanding, one, what it is that I really want to build, and two, where the benefits to this addition to the market, what benefits it really would bring and what it brings. Right. So one of the things I found now is now there is a lot of focus on not so much the tech, but optimizing the automation of the tech. So I'm not even really coding to any great extent. What I've done is I've actually been able to build a platform now which is heavily automated and partially AI driven. And what I have realized is beneficial and actually serves the mission is improving the automation and AI aspect and optimizing that. And that frees up my time to actually then focus on the things that are actually more important that can drive the success of the business and the growth of the business. Yeah?
Yeah.
So it ties into what the point you were making, Dennis, about AI. It really does. Yeah. AI, yeah, it's very much overhyped right now because without the human intervention being me actually really giving that AI that personality in that direction and optimization, it's basically suboptimal. So AI, in my view, AI is a tool like any other. It's like the calculator. As you said, we don't do square root in our heads or manually anymore. We use a calculator. There will come a time, and as a programmer myself, for the past 15, 20 years, I can say this for a fact, there will come a time where programming, software development will be very much like using the calculator to do the square root because we don't do it manually anymore. It will be using AI to perform a lot of our software development
But
tasks.
yeah, but I will say that there will come a time when we will make a very great distinction between, and let me say something too, that the world is getting increasingly complex. Okay.
Very much so.
Increasingly complex. And the interactions, the flow of data, the flow of policies, all of these things are getting to be increasingly complex. Very few people are equipped mentally to understand the complexities of the systems that now run the world. One set of people who are very well equipped to understand that, those of you on this call. When you start to design software systems, when you start to understand things about architectures, when you start to understand how systems, components, and complex things interact, when you can start working as a developer in doing a small piece of a very complex application or platform, and you're able to hold that in your head as a QA, when you're able to do that, you have to hold the system in your mind and understand the interactions of that. These are skills for the modern age, right? And the lines between digital and personal lives are getting blurred more and more. So I'll say that the new thinking is not around, we talk about, let's leave that thing. I think software development is a good term for the phase that we've been from, or application development. But now we've got to get to a digital ecosystem or a digital platform architecture and development mindset. That is a task that still requires very much, especially those first two P's are ones that I can tell you that an AI will not ever. So here's a strong word from Dennis, and you can tell me in 150 years when I'm dead and gone whether or not I was correct. Ever be able to replicate is, first of all, an AI cannot be a person to be able to understand what a person's experience is about. It does not feel the purpose that person wants to achieve to make them care about what they're trying to do. And unless you can make people care, and that's the fallacy that we fall into as developers.
Correct.
Let me create this wonderful tech. I will create it, and you figure out why people should care. And you can make them care. Unless you can bridge that gap, AI can produce anything it wants. So that's where the value is. I'd encourage everybody here to start thinking about how you can start building that into, even if you are looking for a software development job. I can guarantee you, if you start talking about these sorts of things in your interviews, rather than just what languages, you're going to start to connect with people who are interviewing you, have been thinking about this for a while in ways that they didn't even expect. So start leaning into that with your own applications, with your own startups, like Owen has just realized, and it's very difficult to pivot. I know that sometimes you can fall in love, as I said, with your plans. You should resist.
Indeed.
Very difficult.
The irony, though,
I know,
is that it was difficult, but after going through it was like withdrawal symptoms, but after going through that period, and after doing the pivot, and reaching the point I'm at now, it has been the most beneficial thing to my startup.
Good.
The most beneficial thing. The startup is actually in a position now where it is taking off and becoming self-sustainable.
That's amazing.
And achieving growth from the ground up now, and it's amazing. We'll talk about it more, on the call. You and I can discuss that more.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. I know how much you have invested in it. I don't mean just money, emotionally, time, energy invested in it. And so it can be very difficult to make those sorts of pivots. But when you understand that you really do need to lean into these purpose and problems that people have, and their purposes, that you really start to understand sometimes it's necessary to be successful. Anybody else with your comments or questions before we start winding up?
Sure.
Yes, Anthony, good to see you.
One of the things that really just hits home for me is that I still hear people talking about the information age. And I'm going like, the information age is gone. We're past the we're post to that. And people don't quite understand the reality of the age of automation, the age of business intelligence. They don't quite grasp what that means. And so I hear Owens cry because from about 2022, I spent about 2 years pivoting and doing that whole releasing my baby girl software, letting it go and doing a full redesign. Spent 2 years doing it. And then when it's fully released, then there's a whole host of new technologies which come down the pipe. And it's okay. It's doing well. It's a major upgrade to what it was because it was designed back in like 2012. It's a major redesign, but now you have to pivot again. And so pivoting is becoming pivotal to living in this environment.
Yeah.
And you have to have the mental flexibility to understand where you're going to pivot, when you're going to pivot. You have to have those 5 Ps are essential. Knowing me first and foremost, the people. You've got to know the people. And you've got to understand your relationships map. You're going to have your tough customers. You're going to have your early adopters. And you have to see which one of those groups are really going to be your digital evangelists for your product. So for me, one of the things that I think we have here, even in terms of going forward, in terms of disseminating information, is I remember you said you said at one point, we need to do these mappings, and it's not going to take long. It'll just take a week. And for some people, a week is 5 years because they've got to be doing so many things in the course of a week. But being able to actually put what your realistic timelines are for these things and being able to transfer this to younger developers or even other developers, other people in this space, I think that's a really valuable contribution.
Oh my goodness.
I've been working with this new mantra for myself, which says, do not make unreasonable deadlines. And because it is just the reality of dealing with customers, with the pressures of life, and it becomes easy to say to one person, okay, yeah, sure, I'll do that in a week. But then you've got Zoom goes down. You can't make any of your meetings. And you've got to build in the variable timelines that will account for just life happening. So yeah, I really think this has been a real good discussion. I think this is a real key thing. Again, look, as you said, looking back at yourself 25 years ago, I wish I had learned this stuff on my beginning of my journey in technology. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Anthony, it wasn't the case 25 years ago. I think so now, and I'll tweak your wording a little bit, that the information age has now become an ecosystem age, where everything that you do is part. If you walk down to the store right now and buy milk, it's part of a global ecosystem. It's everything that we do is now part of a connected global ecosystem where all of the information that ties that together is digital. Digital is inextricably linked to everything that we do, everything from cement to, yes, AI processors. But it is all digital. You take the digital aspect of that, we are now in a fully digitally linked ecosystem. And so now we start to have different sorts of thinking. And even whether it is to say an application that you as a founder are trying to create, or just putting, for example, a new CRM into a sales team. That CRM in the sales team is part of an ecosystem within the organization, within the sales team, where they have their own goals and priorities in lives, where the customers that they're dealing with, the organization has, though it's part of the broader ecosystem. And I think that it's impossible to do a good job of understanding what to build without an understanding of the ecosystem as a whole. And as I've said, I don't think that a lot of people who have not been trained in systems, either explicitly systems thinking or things like software architecture, are really equipped to put that together in their minds. I've gone into organizations to do a digital optimization process for just like web and content management and other things. And then we've done some of these 5P artifacts, and they're like, oh, wow, this is great. I've never really looked at my organization. I'm not even talking about from the digital team. I'm saying the executive stakeholders start to look at that and say, I should use this just from a planning and understanding perspective. Spending a week, and by the way, a week is actually for a relatively small organization because you have to get a hold of external stakeholders. It can take a little bit more time. I would tip we're dealing with mostly enterprise level customers. We're usually trying to do more of a 30-day road mapping exercise for an enterprise once they're trying to think about their overall digital ecosystem. But if you have spent years building your business and can't spend a few days or a week mapping it out, you're not very much equipped to now bring on another team member or person who understands how things work, really. So if you're trying to build something that can scale, if you're even trying to understand the impacts of things in a complex way, it's helpful for you yourself as a leader or as a team member to have that view. So I think it's something that we can actually bring to the table. Now, I think that if we're talking about business process kind of analyses today without a digital hat on, you're missing a big part of the picture. I know that most people, even on the executive side, are not equipped to do data analysis, Rowan. So you as a data person, most people don't understand really how data is segmented, how best to normalize it, how best to structure it. And these are things that we understand very well from our backgrounds. And so we have skill sets that should be branched out well beyond just our monkey software developer hats. And really, I think we got to start pushing that sort of a thinking, and that will be the way that we can preserve our value in this global ecosystem right now. I think for myself, I say that I want to push this kind of thinking around the Caribbean. We should be known for this kind of a thinking. If you just want somebody who's just going to go do, you want the bricklayers of software, yeah, sure, go get somebody to write thousands of lines of codes for you exactly as you said it. But if you would like people who think about how your organization is part of a broader ecosystem and solutions that really fit, that's what we should be known for, I think. And I hope that we can take this to heart. We've got 1 minute left, and I think that's a good segue to wrap it up.
I would just say, Dennis, thank you very
Yes.
much. A very thought-provoking presentation. And as I'm sure you would appreciate, very relevant to what Pacquiao is about with taking triple entry accounting to the world. Needed absolutely.
So I'm going to preview some stuff that I've been scheming with Everton. Don't plug your ears, Everton. Don't tell nobody. Scheming with David about, because things like triple entry accounting, and I am here in Dominica today for the anti-money laundering and combating the funding of terrorism. So the ALM and CFT conference is the first of its kind here in the region. That's been quite an issue. But those issues are part of a broader ecosystem. ALM conversation, fighting that with things like triple entry accounting fits into a broader ecosystem. But you have the problem, as David had mentioned in his episode about Pacquiao and triple entry accounting, the adoption of that becomes a challenge, because now you have to think about how do you get both sides of that marketplace to adopt it. So we're going to be thinking about ways to leverage things like social media and other ways to build around that. So we're not just thinking about an application or a particular technical solution, but rather the broader ecosystem and how we build that. So that's look out for that.
A much bigger picture and much more difficult task than the technology itself.
Much more. The mindset changing is the parts.
Yes.
If you can change the way people think, now but you know what though? We saw with the advent of Facebook and the social media platforms that you can change how people think in a heartbeat. So it's a big task, but it does not have to be a slow task if you find the right messaging and positioning. If you understand some of those first 4 Ps, it's an easier task. All right. And to Brittany's point, and it is worth it. Amen to that.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for showing up. Spread the word and hope to see you next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
All right, all right, bye.